more freedom here. So between all these mics and stuff, so. Hey guys, good evening. So, we've been on quite a journey, haven't we, from last night already. Had quite some conversation with some of you, and I just want to thank you also, just kind of, always thinking of it. This is for some of you, or the majority of you, or even when I came in contact with all these thinking and materials about sexuality and so it's so new and maybe even foreign to us. But we are on this journey of discovering all the metaphors that God has given us to understand His love for us better. And we started last night exploring actually what I want to clarify, our central identity that we have in Christ. I think one of the things coming into America is that it's interesting sometimes how lingo and Christian lingo comes in. And so often when we talk about what is my identity in Christ, you guys say or forgiven or redeemed or sanctified. And in Dutch we would never do that because that's not an identity, that's an attribute that's been done to us. We are forgiven, we are redeemed, and we are sanctified in order to what? To be fully sons and daughters of the Father. If there's any core identity that I want to plant into your minds, that's whenever somebody says, what is your identity in Christ? It's like, I'm the son of the Father, I'm the daughter of the reconciled son and daughters of the Father. That's your core identity. And when we talk about sexuality, that's just a metaphor. It's just another way for God to show His love for us, a deep metaphor. But our sexuality is not our identity. How the world around us want to say something different. And yes, it's so deep ingrained in us because it's explaining something of the gospel to us. But our sexuality is not our core identity. Your son and daughtership is. So that's the difference, I think, if we go from Friday night into this morning. Just wanted to clarify that. Is that yesterday we were talking about our core identity that we have. And then sexuality is a part that to understand God's love for us better in an amazing way. But at the end of the day, and we're going to look at that today, but also tomorrow, the one relationship that we'll bring into eternity is this friendship with Jesus as an older brother and our son and daughtership of the Father. Just want to clarify that. And so this morning we went to Ephesians 5, and we read through Paul's kind of what man and woman relationship, and we looked through the lens of sexuality through that. And then in verse 32 it says that it is a profound mystery, the relationship with man and woman, but he's talking about Christ in the church. Let's go through the slides here. I have so I want to talk about tonight about the gospel of relationship, that we have two gifts where we can represent Christ in the church, like Ephesians 5, verse 32 teaches us. And one of my friends, Dave Bennett, he's a great friend of mine. His testimony is that he was a gay activist, an Australian gay activist, and he met Jesus in a gay bar in Sydney. And that's where he met Jesus and totally changed his life. And his book is coming out. It's called A War of Love next month, and I'm excited to read it. But one of the things that he gave to me, it was this beautiful, well, it's kind of like a diagram, actually, to explain a little bit more of this mystery of that fact that men and women are reflecting something about God. And you can just go through this one, yes. And he says, so Father, Son, and Spirit, they are God, but they are three very different personalities in how they come, but they're God. Those three, very different, they have in this perfect unity, and they are God. And God Himself, in Genesis 1 and 2, says that He creates men and women, and that's the next slide, and that He creates men and women as two different personalities and entities, as well about Himself, to reflect something of that Trinity, that unity. And men and women are body, mind, and soul, I think I put under that. So their mind and their soul and their body, there's these three, but there's a oneness, but they're very different from each other. And if we're thinking it through that a little bit more about, like our gay friends, or even I have to think through that as well, kind of like, okay, well, why can it not be a man and a man? Or why can it not be a woman and a woman? But this is why, because if even the triangle of man and woman and God are reflecting something of the unity of the Trinity, this mystery of the unity of the Trinity, those three elements, those three personalities has to be distinctly different, like Father, Son, and Spirit is. And what's so beautiful is about the man and woman relationship is that also there can be a third one, the baby. And so he explained this to me, and I kind of like, he studies in Oxford, he's smart. And I just love this because it's even deep, there is this reflection of the Trinity in there. Just want to give you that as kind of also, maybe you like diagrams better than pictures, so here you go. And for this evening, I wanted to go to Matthew 22, verse 23 to 33, where we go into a next passage in the Bible, which is interesting to read, I would say, in all the things that we've been talking about. So if you have your Bible with you, Matthew 22, verse 23 till 33. And this is the story of the encounter of the Sadducees with Jesus. And the Sadducees, who say actually there's no resurrection, came to him with a question. Teacher, they say, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for him. Now there were seven brothers among us. The first one married and died, and since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother. The same thing happened to the second and third brother, right on down to the seventh. Finally, the woman died. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be of the seven, since all of them were married to her? And Jesus replied, "You are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. But about the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what God said to you? I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living." And when the crowd heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. So again, talk with your neighbor for just a couple of minutes. What is Jesus teaching us here? And the question that pops off, of course, is why will people not marry or be given in marriage after the resurrection? Yeah, so why will people not marry or be given in marriage after the resurrection? So just talk with your neighbor what you're thinking. Why? Okay, let's come back again. If men and women and their marriage and their sexuality is a picture that shows something about the unity between Christ and the church, and it predicts and it moves forward to something which is about to come. If that's that paper that we look through to see the greater thing, when that greater thing is there, we don't need the picture anymore. Guys, Captain Marvel trailer's out. Have you seen it? Yes. When does it come out? March, April? What is it? Do you guys know? March. So I'll be probably watching it for several times, right? The trailer, that's like, it's awesome. All this kind of like expectations. But you know what? When April hits and the movie's out for already a month, I'm not watching the trailer. I'm going to the movies, right? And if I still watch the trailer, I'm kind of pathetic in that sense. But guys, marriage is the trailer. Marriage is the trailer to the greater thing, to the movie, which is what happens when Christ comes together with his bride. So ladies and gentlemen, can I proclaim this, that marriage is not the end goal of your life or your existence. Marriage is just a window, a picture of what's about to come. It will end. It will cease to exist. Why? Because there will be this perfect unity between Christ and his church. And there's another element that I find so beautiful about this, that there will be also this perfect unity on earth, a perfect unity within the bride herself, the church. Because here on earth, even the happiest marriage people will still miss each other in relationship to one another. And if they're not honest about it or don't say that's true, they're lying. There's still parts in life that they won't understand each other, that it's still hardworking to understand each other, to have that deep level of intimacy. But that's not only in marital relationship, but in every meaningful relationship and friendship that we have here on earth. But if we meet each other in heaven, we'll be meeting each other right down on that deep level. And that's not only spouses with each other, the word spouses here on earth, but it will be with me, with every one of you. That when we meet each other in heaven, it will be this deep connection. And then we say, remember 2018? Fall conference? And that's why where we're going to is so much better than marriage and our earthly sexuality, although it's beautiful, but because they're only a picture, a window, what is about to come. John Piper, one of his quotes, he says, marriage and family are temporary for this age. The church is forever. I'm declaring the radical biblical truth that being in a human family is no sign of eternal blessing, but being in God's family means being eternally blessed. Relationships based on family are temporary. Relationships on union with Christ are eternal. Marriage is just a temporary institution, but what it stands for lasts forever. Beautiful. The problem from our culture is Hollywood and Christian culture is the idolization and worship of romance, relationship, marriage, and sex. Many of us outside the church, and more importantly within the church, have believed the lie that a romantic relationship and marriage and sex will give that fulfillment and happiness. And that's what we've been taught of. That's what we raised up in, even in the church. And there's this world around us, if we look at TV and movies, that tell us that same message. Two things about that. I think your generation is so compassionate and justice. And because you have been raised up in a culture that says romance and relationship and marriage is something that will fulfill me and I have a right to it. And that's why you're so compassionate with your gay brother and sister that says they have to have the same right as I do. And that's why we are kind of like struggling even, how are we addressing our gay brothers and sisters or, even our Christian brothers and sisters? What does that look like? But it's not because of your compassion and justice that's wrong in here, but it's because our culture is saying that marriage and romance give you that fulfillment. And one of the things coming to America, and please read my tone here because I don't want to judge. This is not out of judgment. This is also not of shaming you. But one of the things that I find very concerning when I came to America on TV is a show and a phenomenon that's called The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, where people are serial dating to find fulfillment. And we're watching it, and we're indulging in that. What does that do to us, to our thinking? If the call for us is to give ourselves away, and that marriage and romance is to portray Christ to one another, but we're feeling and seeing people just to find, hey, if you're not good enough to fulfill me, and you're not good enough to fulfill me, and you're not good enough to fulfill me, and you meet the standards, what does that do to us? What has that done to us? And so we develop this entitlement on relationship, marriage, and sex because we think that we can truly be happy. We believe that we have a right on it. And also in church, we say this because, when people say and know that I'm single or tell them that, or you're like, oh, you're single? And then, the pity nod, tilting of the head and like, oh, what's still happened for you? What's that about? But singleness, or being, singleness or the pursuit of celibacy is almost one of the worst things that we can think about ourselves for other people. We should not want that for people, right? And that's how I think we even cultivate that in our own churches. And so we have fed this entitlement, having a right on something. Can I say this, just as followers of Jesus, we don't have right on anything. I have left my rights at the cross. Because my sexuality and my body are not meant to be given right to, that they have a right to be fulfilled. Our sexuality is not meant to be satisfied, but meant to give itself unconditionally away to others, like Jesus has given himself to the bride. That's Ephesians 5. It's not meant to take life, but to give life. Because that is what we do when we think that we have a right on something. We take and claim something for ourselves that we think that will make us happy and fulfill us. It's the move that Eve made in the garden. The knowledge of good and evil was not necessarily a bad thing for her to have, but it was not for her to grasp. It was for her to receive from the good Father, but what she did, she was grabbing it for herself. Instead of a posture of receiving, she was grabbing it. And that's exactly what also we are doing with our longings for sexuality, relationship, and intimacy. We want to take and claim and get it instead of receiving it from our Father. So we're all disoriented in our sexuality. Doesn't matter if you're straight or gay. Human sexuality is meant fundamentally, as this picture shows us, as mutual self-giving, like Christ gave himself as a church. That is the picture of the cross. Now, we talked about sexuality is proclaiming the gospel, but that means that it's self-sacrificial. In Ephesians 5, in the next slide, just repeat the verses there. Husband, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word, to present herself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. That is what self-sacrificial love does from Jesus. He gave himself up for us to make us holy and blameless. And that is what our sexuality should point towards, to give ourselves fully and conditionally to the other person. But we are disoriented and broken since the fall, and we're using all our bodies and sexuality we're not using that as self-giving love, but we use it to fulfill ourselves. So sometimes we think in a relationship like this. It's like it's adding up, like in calculus. I feel like I'm a half person, and I need the other one to fulfill me. Or I'm just a quarter, and then the other is 3/4, and then I'll be, but I will complete with the other person. But in relationships, it's not adding up. It's multiplying. And the more you need the other person to fill you, the less you are together. So nothing. No relationship, no other person can fulfill me. No parent, no child, no friend, no lover, no spouse. Nobody can carry the happiness of your soul. If I try to put the happiness of my soul on somebody else, that person will be crushed by the weight of it. Love, acceptance, and safety comes not from your spouse, but through your spouse. They are not the source. Your spouse or your friend, you can apply this also in friendship. Your spouse is not the source of love, acceptance, and safety. They're just the channel. Only Jesus can fulfill us. Only Jesus can carry our whole soul. And that's why we are all, men and women, the bride of Christ. We have to open up ourselves first for Him to come and fill us and give us fullness of life. He makes us whole so that we can become fruitful and give ourselves like others, like Him to others, and also in our sexuality. And we can do that as married people, but we can also do that as single or celibate people. Because there's a myth of singleness out there in the Christian world. The fact that you can be single or celibate, or that you don't have a relationship without the gift of singleness. Who's heard that? Like, I'm single, but I don't have the gift of singleness. I'm like, but biblically, that's kind of like, that's not true. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 7, where Paul says, I wish that you were all as I am, single, celibate, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has the one gift and the other has that. So, by definition, your status of what you have, relationship or marriage, that is a gift. And either or you're single, that is a gift in itself. Doesn't matter if you want it, yes or no. Yeah? Because married people or people in a relationship often sometimes don't want it either, but they have that gift because they're in it. And that same things go for singleness. If you are single right now, you have that gift. And so who's married here or in a relationship? Bless you with that gift. Who is single here in this room? That's the rest of you. Bless you with that gift. But use it then as that gift. And it's a state. It's not kind of like an emotion like, oh, this is what I really want. Maybe not. Because maybe it's temporary. But you know what? For 50% of married people, often, marriage is also a temporary state. Maybe for years. But when your spouse dies, you go back to the gift of singleness. So both are gifts. So let's explore these gifts. And the first one is the gift of marriage. And this is a Dutch. This is nice, right? In the Netherlands, a real old church. I love marriage. I love to marry people too. That's what I've done. One of my staff friends here in the Netherlands. Marriage is a beautiful gift that God has given to one in marriage. Because yes, married people can learn to give themselves unconditionally to one another, including in their sexual relationship, and that's an absolutely beautiful thing. It's a sacrament when they do that. They're a reflection of Christ in the church with that. In marriage, both have the opportunity to be cleansed, washed, and redeemed through the relationship with each other to become more like Jesus. Wow, to live with someone 24/7, you see each other's brokenness and still you commit yourself to stay with one another. It's amazing. But the gift of their marriage doesn't stop there, just as something between them. The Bible teaches us that they have become one. So if they give themselves to one another only, that is pretty alone and self-centered. Where two become one and they're just focused on each other, that is self-centered. And I've seen that sometimes with couples. And sometimes when they are dating already, the relationship is actually preoccupied with itself. I was talking with Jeff and Alison this afternoon, and we were talking about this, and they said to use the analogy is there's 2 ticks and no dog. And it's like, well, that's a good one. The relationship is really actually just preoccupied with itself. And it's very often very intense too, and even in display in the presence of others. And so others around you are kind of like thinking like, just get a room, right? Just like, it's often when you see 2 people who are seeking this fulfillment with each other, that they'll only have eyes for each other, but are not able to kind of move outward and say, hey, we both want to be a gift to the community around us. Because the beautiful gift of relationship is not for the couple only. A gift has always been given, a gift has always been given outside of itself. So as a couple that have become one from two, they ought to give themselves also to others outside of the couple. And in these gifts, there's two ways of fruitfulness. First of all, the literal way of fruitfulness to have babies, the opportunity to have babies. An amazing gift to become a parent, with also many challenges. It's a part of God's purpose for us to multiply. And sex is in the center, I would say, of God's plan with individual people. Just think about it. It matters so much who has sex with whom. I know, parents don't have sex. But if your parents didn't have sex with each other, you would not exist. You as who you are would not exist. It's crazy to think about, I know. Having children is so central in God's purposes with His world, and having children is an opportunity for married people to give themselves unconditionally to their child. So even that in the brokenness of our world, if there's something that blocking that or a couple is unable to conceive, you see that this is such a kind of a core thing in our lives to be able to do so. That's why the struggle is real for that too. Having children is this opportunity to give themselves unconditionally to this child, because you know also that, yes, when they're cute and sweet and they're sleeping, then you can love that child. But when they're not, oh my word, And Paul's writing that in Ephesians 5. Paul, that has written Ephesians 5 about marriage, also writes this in 1 Corinthians 7. That he actually also says, I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affair, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affair. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. And I'm saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in an undivided devotion to the Lord. So here's Paul in 1 Corinthians 7, but he's also the Paul that writes Ephesians 5. He just have an honesty about what marriage is. And we have to be that too. Grass is always greener on the other side, but let's be real about what marriage is. It's a beautiful gift. And at the same time, yes, there's the struggle as well. So that's the first one. It's kind of like, yes, there is this, this way of fruitfulness, literally. But marriage has that primary concern and energy for the marriage and family. And that's the concern of this world, that Paul says. And my friends do express to me that often. But what I tell them is not underestimate the light, the gospel that they are in our world and our current society. The fact that they're still both together in a committed relationship and children that being raised up in a family with both parents, that should not be taken for granted anymore. And you guys know that. This kind of a family with Jesus in the center is that city on a hill that cannot be hidden. They are the living gospel. It's the good news for the community. So let's honor marriage and family. But as much of that, we honor that, we should also honor the gift of celibacy. Like Paul says, the gift of celibacy or singleness, I have experienced that in multiple ways. So even deciding to come to the US, that was quite an easy decision for me to make just by myself. I didn't have to think about my family or my wife, what she would do. And also, I'm traveling all over the world right now and also domestically, and it's great because I have this opportunity to be fully present with you, to give myself fully to you, without any other, a family to think of at home or something that's distracting me. And, so I'm not preoccupied, and it's great. And for Christmas or Thanksgiving, I don't have to think about the in-laws. Just go to my own family. But practically, for a celibate guy, I don't have physical sex. And I don't get my fulfillment as it's not meant to. But my sexuality comes out in expression in my energy to give myself in connection and intimacy and friendship to other people. Which I can give then as a gift to multiple people. I can spend myself fully to them without any restraints because, when I can get home, I don't need any reserve for somebody else tomorrow. And of course, I would love for somebody to say, how was your weekend and all of that, but that's, there's two sides of it. So singleness or celibacy is not only a gift to myself, but also to others. Like marriage is not supposed to be a gift only to the two in marriage. A gift, again, is always meant to be given itself outside of itself. That's why also this picture. This is my community in Amsterdam where we said goodbye to our IHers who were in front there. But this is the people that I've given myself fully in Amsterdam. And I've given myself fully away to them. So not the relationship with one specific person has cleansed, washed, and redeemed me to become more like Jesus, but multiple others has done that for me. And I can give myself to multiple others. That's the gift of singleness and celibacy. That's my way of being fruitful. I don't have physical children, I have spiritual children. And I have multiple over the years. And I celebrate that. And I think one of the greatest thing about the Navigators is the ability or the stimulants actually to learn how to invest in other people. To give myself away to other people. I think that has been such a lifeline for me. So celibacy is a good thing. We wouldn't even be Christians today without it. Think of Jesus, think of Paul. The spread of the gospel in the beginning went all over the place because of Paul's undivided devotion. And what's so interesting thing with the IH team, so I'm part of our IH team, so I'm part of our sending team who sends IHs all over the place. And what we're doing is also shepherding them when they're on the field. And I've been traveling to New Zealand and to Kenya. And I'm doing that with who? With other single American staff. We have the freedom to do so. And I don't know if you met Luke, who was at the table with Anna Ayed in that, but he has 4 kids under 4 right now. No, 4 kids under 6, sorry. And he's working with us, and it's great to work with him, but he has some limitations in that sense that he cannot travel that much. And that's the gift that I can give and bring into this team. And think of Jesus. We downplay his humanity if we don't think that he would have that he was tempted to settle down with a wife and have sex and have kids. But why didn't he? In his lifetime here on earth, he remained single for us. Those things were not compatible with God's salvation plan for him to live out, that he would die and rise again. But he gained so much more. He regained us, the bride, in the life hereafter. And that's why celibacy in this lifetime also reflects Christ in the church. Christopher West says, Christian celibacy is not a direction of sexuality. It points us to the ultimate purpose and meaning of sexuality. For this reason, to become one flesh, those who remain celibate for the kingdom skip the earthly sacrament of marriage in anticipation of the heavenly reality, the marriage of the Lamb. Another quote for him is, celibacy for the kingdom is not a declaration that sex is bad. It's a declaration that while sex can be awesome, there's something even better, infinitely better. Christian celibacy is a bold declaration that heaven is real and it's worth selling everything to possess. And then Russell Hobbs say, and he talks about us, Protestants have cast aside a gift from God. Jesus presented this gift personally to his church. For 1,500 years, Christians held it high and thank God for it. However, when they inordinated, exalted over marriage, Luther and other reformers raised their voices in anger. But today, 500 years later, celibacy had yet to regain its rightful stature among the descendants of the reformers, us evangelicals. Protestants must recover the gift, clean it, and return it to a place of honor besides its sister marriage. We need to de-idolize marriage as an exclusive relationship in the church, and we need to lift up equally to marriage, this life of celibacy, as a valid way to represent the image of Christ in the bride. And I'm discovering in my celibacy that I can make a marital-like vow and commitment to Jesus, wanting to honor this picture of Christ, the groom becoming one with his bride, the church, by committing myself completely and fully as part of the bride towards the community, towards the church, which is also a picture of what's about to come. Yes, and that will leave me in so many ways here on earth unfulfilled in some of my longings. But marriage will leave married people in other ways unfulfilled, right? Our lives is not meant to get fulfillment, but to give ourselves to Him and others fully so we will be fulfilled, and ultimately fulfillment will be when the groom and bride will come together at the end of the time. We have to live with an eternal perspective, because then we can make also the sacrifices sometimes to represent Christ with the fullest of who we are. So let's put these two gifts together. What has the gift of marriage and the gift of celibacy? How can we put those things together? We have to. And I think we have separated the two too much. It's a challenge in our world, in our Western world, the individualization, the loss of community. It's amazing how we have so many big houses here in the US, and we're not part of the community. We just like drive from our driveway into our garage, and we're like fortress of my house. And it's so interesting, I think. And there's so much loneliness. I think single people are lonely, and because of that, we're compromising our values. And I have some of my gay friends who say, Laurence, I walk this life of celibacy, and I know that's part actually, I think that is the most honoring to God and Jesus. But I'm so lonely in Christian community because of the emphasis of family in the church, and that I have no space to belong in when I become older. I'm so lonely. I just kind of compromise, and I just go, I will just be in this committed gay relationship, because I'm dreading the loneliness. And I can judge him for that decision. But that's on us. That's on us, the community, that we couldn't provide people, single people, and it's also going for heterosexual singles, that we sometimes see, why are you doing this relationship with somebody who doesn't follow the Lord as you do? But they're dreading the loneliness because we separated marriage and family from single life. But honestly, more and more I see, but because family and the nuclear family and the emphasis on that in our culture, in our Christian culture, that families and couples are actually lonely too. One friend of mine in Amsterdam said, I have a great marriage and I love my family, but we're lonely together because we don't have very deep relationship outside of that family unit. And we need to learn how to do this. I needed to learn how to do this. I had this journey also from self-centeredness to self-giving in this particular part of life and how to do community well. I remember one year, in the middle of my first years on staff, but one year, there were 12 weddings that I had to go to. And there were a lot of my best friends. And it didn't stop there, because the next year I got 17 wedding invitations. I'm like, what? And there was kind of like this course of action, or kind of like this pattern that started to happen, because it's kind of like, and you can bring this one up, just read that, it's funny. And it's overly dramatic maybe, but there was this pattern. Oh, somebody's understanding it now. But there was this pattern strangely, that whenever one of my best friends got married, I'm kind of like, you know what? See you in a year. Because that usually was true. That a lot of the times, they were so kind of preoccupied with that first year of marriage. And kind of and then often I did get invited, but it was always, with them, or it's they didn't have that much time anymore before they got married. And then after a year or something, they say, hey, can I hang out with you again? Just one-on-one. I'm like, great, you're back. Hey, welcome. But then the kids came, and then there was no more time. And I was like, okay, well, buy friendship. And I went through that for several times. Because I also in that mindset of like, well, I can't be that friend anymore that I need. So I guess this is where it ends. And then my sister lived in Australia with my brother-in-law. And at one point, when I went to visit them, you don't go there for just a week. You go there for 3 or 4 weeks at a time from the Netherlands. And so one particular moment of a visit, they had 3 kids, and they were all 3 under 4. And I was in that house for 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm like, oh, so that's what it means to have children under 4 and then 3 of them too. And my compassion grew for my friends who had little children. I'm like, I now understand why you're so exhausted and that you don't have time. But what I did when I was there, I was kind of like, what can I do to lift the load? And so when I started kind of like seeing that, I'm like, you know what? Changing the diapers and bathing them, you can do that. But I love to cook. So I ruled the kitchen those 3 weeks. I cooked. I cleaned that kitchen. The whole house was a mess, but the kitchen was spotless. I did the groceries. I made my brother-in-law's scones because he loves them so much. I made fried noodles for my 2 nieces because they love that so much. And I could be that gift to my family. And I came home. It's like, how can I be a gift to my married friends and their families? And how can they be a gift to me? Because being Uncle Lau is one of the precious gifts that's been given to me through my nieces and nephew. But also, when I go now into my friend's house and I be part of that family dinner, and I have the baby on my lap, and I kind of like feed it so that my friend finally can have the dinner in warmth and peace, as I'm giving that gift to them, to her or him, I have my daddy moment with his child. And I'm talking with the spouse of my friend, and she's the women's voice that I sometimes need to hear also in my life. And we share community that way. And they're a gift to me. And we're meant to be gift to one another. And that's how we should live together and do this life together. But we separated singles and married people in church. And I would say in America it's even worse. The focus on nuclear family is even worse here than back home. I came into America, and the first year in Colorado Springs, with all these navigators around, even knowing what it is to be abroad, the first year I was never invited into a family home. You don't do that very well. What I'm used to is that I would be invited in family home, and we have that moment and we're part of that family. And how do we do that better? Because one of the things that I've seen, you're separating yourselves already while you start dating, that you don't hang out anymore with your single friends. You start only double dating with other couples. And how do we create this community, guys? And that we can do this friendship longer term with each other. Because sometimes when I started, my 2 friends, when I had women friends in Navigators, and I was very close to them, and they started dating other guys, I became friends with him as well. And here, kind of like it's almost not possible to do that. And so I just want to challenge you guys. If you're in a relationship, do you talk as a couple how you can be a gift for other people? That is not only focused on yourself. How are you not only a gift to your married or other dating friends, but also to your single friends? Are you asking your single friends to double date with you also? And single friends, when they ask you, you're not complaining, you're not the third wheel, you're not the fifth wheel, you're not the pity party. Stop doing that. Yeah. Receive the gift that they want to give to you, that you will be part of that relationship. And then you give yourself away to them as well. And then you're going to learn about what it means to be in a relationship. And when they get children, then you learn how to be distracted when people are talking. And you will learn that, I know exactly now the right questions to ask. Oh, you have a 6 months baby, how's your sleeping going? And are they eating already? And maybe teeth and all of that. It's because I'm hanging out with them. trying to understand what their life is. But then married friends, how do you include, even in your baby phase, how do you include your single friends with it? We're meant to live one on another. If there's something about Navigators, we say we want to do life-on-life discipleship. If there's any opportunity to do that, is among married and singles. We need to change our culture. We need to change our church culture. So to singles also, even if that's temporary, how are you using your gift to your friends who are in relationships? And one of the other things I think with being part of the Navs is that giving yourself away in discipleship relationships is one of the greatest things that you can do to prepare yourself for marriage. Because you learn how to give and love someone else. Man, that sounds like a good, exercise to do. Anyway,